Morning. The third session of the Faculty Development Program organized by History Wing, Directorate of Distance Education, Annamalai University, is going to start now. We are happy to have Dr. Sam Praveen Kumar, Assistant Professor of Philosophy, Madras Christian College, Chennai, as our today's resource person. I am happy to introduce Professor Sam Praveen Kumar. His thrust area of research, teaching, and training is philosophy, ethics, industrial psychology, Christian theology, peace studies, mental health, human resource management, teacher education, etc., etc. He has been associating himself with a number of NGOs for the sake of training young talents on personality development and human resource management. Now I hand over the session to Professor Sam Praveen Kumar, Assistant Professor of Philosophy, Madras Christian College, Chennai. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. Yeah, so it is an honor and a privilege to be part of this FDP. And I thank ma'am for giving me this opportunity.
Sir, you want to?
Yes, sir. I'm coming in, sir.
Okay.
Visible now?
Yes, sir. Visible, sir.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Yes, good morning, everyone. Once again, a very good morning. And it is my honor and a privilege to be part of this FDP. And one of the reasons that pushed me to take up this assignment is that I felt this topic that ma'am gave was very relevant. And to some extent, I need to be honest in saying that this topic has also challenged me of late. It has made me to think about what is the real scenario that we are facing in terms of academic, in terms of teaching, and also in terms of pandemic that's happening around us. So the question was like, in what way we are being hit in terms of emotion, and how do we respond to it? Now, obviously, like we being as an academic community, we do have a responsibility of training young minds, helping them to have a kind of a better life. So having that perspective ahead of us, and also to think about the journey that we are going through in this pandemic time, I felt the challenge, the topic was quite challenging and also quite demanding. And I felt, okay, like since I've been training myself in the area of psychology, in the area of human resource development and things like that, I felt, okay, like this would be the apt time for me to really take up this assignment and do as much as I can. And I am also aware of the fact saying that this is pretty much a conference that revolves around the idea of history and how historical studies can be developed in a much better way. So my task, and obviously I'm not from a historical background. I'm not from a history background. I'm more from philosophy and a psychology background. So my work for the day would be is to help you understand like how you can cope up with emotion as a professor of history. Not necessarily as a historical professor, but also like a person you are, and also as a human being you are. And also at the same time, like how you can be more effective in not so favorable times. So that's going to be my work for the day. So let us start with some basics, like what we're going to do today. I'm sure that you would have seen my topic. It is emotional challenges, dilemmas, and adaptive response. So this particular lecture, I would categorize them into 4 different modules. One is that we are going to see what is an emotion. So we are going to talk a little bit about emotion, and we are going to see like what would make us very unique from others. So that is something that I'll cover in the area of emotion. Second, I would talk more about when you place your emotion before yourself, or like when you lead yourself through your emotion, what are the challenges that you might confront with? Okay, what are the challenges that you are able to confront with? And challenges, they don't just stay as challenge, But then these challenges would also require of us to do certain actions. So the question is, how do we work out with our dilemmas that we face with human behavior? And finally, I'm going to give a kind of a method by which you can give a very positive approach towards your life and towards your action. So let us start with the first point. Okay, we are going to start with like what is an emotion. So before getting into emotion, like we'll start with some fundamental. In fact, this particular theme, when we talk about the idea of knowing oneself or know thyself, pretty much very ancient in its usage, comes right from the idea of Socrates himself. Know thyself. So the question that I'm going to ask you is that, what makes you as you? What makes you can just have your name in there. Like for example, I would ask myself like this: what makes Sam Praveen Kumar as Sam Praveen Kumar? Question might sound very strange, or it can also be very uncomfortable at the moment. But the simple answer is, your personality makes who you are. So the question is this: what do I mean by personality? Now, obviously, we all know that the language English is basically a combination of Greek and Latin. And obviously, the word personality comes from the Greek word mask, which means like this is how we project ourselves to one another. Now, what is that mask is all about? Okay. Now, when we use this idea of mask in persona in terms of personality, it is not a cover up that we do, but it is the reality that we present ourselves to others. Okay, so when I use this word mask, please do not understand it from a negative connotation, but please do understand it as the real nature of who you are. Now, what does this personality actually means? Now, when you look into this thematic concepts, okay, like there are plenty of definitions that we can go through, but this is like one definition that I often would present to people wherever I go in terms of training or in terms of development as such. The point is, personality refers to individual differences in characteristics, patterns of thinking, feeling, and behaving. Now you can see like there are actually three elements coming in. One is the thinking part of you. Second is the feeling part of you. And third one is your behavioral part. Okay, so it's like thinking, feeling, and behaving. Okay, the study of personality focuses on two broad areas. One is understanding the individual difference in a particular personality characteristics, such as sociability and irritability, which means things that will make you comfortable and things that will make you uncomfortable based on your thought pattern, based on your feelings, and based on the kind of behavioral aspects that you have for yourself. The other is to understand how various parts of a person come together as a whole. So those elements are out there. Now, when you like take it a little further, okay, like these are some other definitions can actually come based on your thought pattern, based on your feelings, and based on the personality is an individual's characteristic pattern of thinking, feelings, and acting. I've said it earlier. David Myers, like he also emphasizes it. Then secondly, personality is the relatively consistent and enduring pattern of perceiving, thinking, feeling, behaving that appears to people of separate identities. That is also. Personality also refers to the unique ways in respond to the environment. Okay, so these are some of the kind of say what an academic way of looking at personality. Now, let us take it a little further, and I want you to like analyze yourself and see it out. And that is, what are emotions? Is it even possible to understand one's emotion? Okay, and is it also is it possible to explore the emotional levels that a person goes through? So the question I'm asking you in return is this. Okay, it's going to be a time of introspective now. You're going to look within yourself and you're going to answer. Number one, have you understood your emotions? Number two, have you explored yourself in all possible emotions? Okay, so those are the two questions that I really ask you. And this is the question that we are going to journey through this session now. Okay, like this is how like we are going to get deep into now. Now, let me start with some classical way of understanding emotions. Okay, I'm starting with one of the ancient understanding that we have, and this comes from Socrates. Now, Socrates, like when he talks about soul, okay, when we talk of soul, the contemporary word that we use for soul is mind. Okay, so that's the most common word that we use now. But then, speaking in terms of Socrates, what we need to understand is that we need to understand the fact that Socrates was trying to understand what makes a human being as a human being. Okay, and starting with that statement like know thyself. Okay, if we would start from there, we would understand the fact saying that Socrates was able to understand three aspects of human being. One is the idea of reason, another one is the idea of spirit, another one is the idea of appetite. Now, reason is the ability to rationalize, to think, to contemplate, and to act according to one's intellect. And when we talk of spirit, it talks about emotion. Appetites are nothing but your needs. Now, what Socrates emphasizes here is that he says that emotions, they need to have these three elements. Sorry, not emotions. The person has to have these three elements in. And he uses the illustration of a chariot and a charioteer. So imagine a charioteer is there. Imagine if reason is the charioteer, spirit and appetite are like horses. Like if a spirit wants to travel in one way, which means your emotion wants to travel one way, your wants travel, your needs travel the other way, you don't have a chariot that's being controlled in a proper way. What Socrates is trying to say is that only when you apply your intellect, only when you apply your reason, only when you apply your ability to contemplate, your act of thinking, that's when your spirit and your appetite comes in a very right direction. And that is when you have a better results that's happening in. Now, what Socrates is talking here is that he's talking about human personality. He says that when you talk of personality, you have three elements there. Make sure that your reason controls your emotion and it also controls your want. The problem that we face in contemporary society is that we do find a lot of emphasis on emotional expressions, and there is very less expression of the intellect. It could happen right from a media post that we do. It can happen with the kind of reaction that happens in a YouTube video, and it can also be the kind of comments that people write there. Everything seems to have an emotional flavor rather than intellectual flavor. Now, what happens is that since we live in a society where emotion is emphasized a lot more, or emotion becomes the way by which a person is being known through, or if we live in a society where we are only known by our feelings, okay, chances are there sometimes we may miss the entire person of who we are. Now, what the model I'm presenting here through Socrates is that we can also govern our emotions through our thought patterns, which refers to the first aspect of personality definition that we saw earlier, which means personality refers to thinking. And the moment when you're able to think, the moment when you're able to control your spirit and your appetite, that's when things becomes more reasonable and your persona becomes whole. So that's what Socrates is trying to do. Now, the other person who comes into the picture is Aristotle. Now, Aristotle, again, like he has written volumes about it, and the word that he uses is catharsis. Okay, so catharsis is basically a point where a person is trying to release their emotions. Okay, but obviously, like he uses the example of a theater. So in theater, what happens is that you have people going to theater so that they can have an exchange of emotion. So imagine if someone is sad, they go to a theater, they watch a drama or they watch a movie. They wish that they receive some sort of happiness out of it. Okay, they receive some sort of emotional exchange. And obviously, Aristotle uses this word catharsis in that context. Okay, like where one would break up themselves and would take up a new emotion into them. So that is where Aristotle is trying to speak of catharsis. Now let us apply this into a classroom setting. Okay, now substitute the word theater with classrooms, or substitute the work with the kind of research that we do in terms of academic, in terms of writing, or in terms of whatever we do. When we go there, what we see in a classroom or what we see in an environment is an expression of emotion. We as a faculty, we may walk in with the emotion, and student would walk in with their emotions. And what happens there is that there is an exchange of emotion that happens in. Imagine if a faculty walks in with a lot of happiness into a classroom and the students are willing to listen, there is a positive emotion that happens in. Imagine the case where the teacher comes with a lot of happiness, with a lot of briskness, and students are very unhappy about the situation. Chances are there that this conflict can also be reflected into a class, which can also have a very unpleasant events that can happen there, that can possibly happen there. Now, what we can understand from this is that what Aristotle is trying to emphasize here is that we always carry our emotion. We take ourselves to this emotion. And whenever we have opportunities, there is an exchange of emotions that can happen in. So that can happen in a classroom, that can happen everywhere that we can face our life with. I'm doing a quick jump, like I'm moving from the Greek understanding to modernity, like I'm coming with Rene Descartes, okay? Rene Descartes, again, one of the most fine thinker who elaborated on this understanding of mind and body relationship. And he does speak about emotion. And during this time, the word emotion was not popular, but the word passion was popular. Like in Socrates' age, the word soul was more popular, but during Descartes' time, the word passion becomes more popular. And he talks about 6 fundamental emotions that everyone carries. One is the emotion of wonder, desire, joy, love, hatred, and sadness. Now, when all these elements, when they form our thinking, okay, when they form our expression, that becomes a personality. So that's what Rene Descartes is trying to post here. Now, what we need to understand here is that Rene Descartes was able to classify different sort of emotions that can be there, but then he fundamentally categorized them into 6. Now, let us do a quick jump from Rene Descartes. Let us jump to another important person who wrote a lot about emotion. That's about Charles Darwin. In his book, The Origin of Species, okay, and also in his book, The Expressions of Emotion in Man and Animal. Charles Darwin, like, he comes up with a very interesting observation. Like, he was able to see like how emotions are expressed in human beings and in other animals. And the more fundamental question that he had was, from where do we derive these emotions? So this was something that Charles Darwin was trying to deal with. And obviously what he started, it didn't stop there, and it was like growing more, because he was able to come up with this kind of formulation, okay? He was able to talk about expression that a person shows in form of behavior. Then he was able to talk about what happens within their body when an expression like that would happen. And then he was able to name those emotions. Okay, for example, imagine if there is an emotion of pain, okay? The possible behavior would be to scream. Okay, sometimes why we shout in our class is that sometimes we can experience a pain that happens through the form of students. Okay, sometimes that might also happen. Sometimes a student can come and challenge us, or sometimes our authorities who are above can also challenge us. And sometimes this pain can also be reflected in some form of screaming. So this is how like Darwin was trying to express how emotion plays a important role in human beings. Now, switching over to another person, William James. Now he was putting up another level. Like William James was doing more on religion, mystical experience, and all these kinds of understanding. And what William James was able to say is that emotions, they have a lot of color and warmth to an experience. And this is where like we also framed statements saying that in the absence of an emotion, a man or a woman cannot be a person that they are. So a man or a woman can never be who they are. So this is how like William James projected it. Like he said, the color and the warmth. Okay, emotion gives color and the warmth, and that what makes an experience a more decorated form of life event. Now moving from there, okay, like I've done a lot of skips, like I've not really given a historical survey of the idea of emotion, but then like I've just given some important aspects as such. And this is where probably like we would come and land in, like this is where we would come and probably end up with. And that is this, okay. Now this is the result of having brain studies, like from behavioral studies, like you move on to brain studies, and probably this is how emotions are categorized now. Number one, they say emotion is a form of event, registration that an event is important. Okay, it is a form of registering an event into our conscious, saying that that event is so important. Now that could be positive, that could also be negative, or it could also be neutral. But then it's just a registration of an event that happens to us. That's one. Second, the attempt by the person to establish, maintain, change, or terminate the relation between the self and the environment on those matters that are important to the person. Which means how a person would act or react with the kind of events that happens in their life. So based on these two understandings, what we can understand is that emotion plays a very vital role, and without emotions, it will be difficult to carry on with the kind of life that we wish to live in. Now, having said about this emotion, I've emphasized a lot on emotion now, but we also saw that emotion has this idea of personality that's coming upon an individual. So the question that I'm going to ask you is that what is your personality? Now, this is where I wanted to tell you that I wish that I had a personality test for you, like Q&A right now in the forms of Google Sheets. But I felt like sometimes it might also be time consuming, and the things that we may do may require a lot of time to analyze an individual report and then to talk about individual personality as such. So I like refrain from doing it. But then I will just give you some gist of how you can understand your personality, so that you can be the judge for yourself and see where you stand. Okay, now this is one model, like I've like picked it up. In fact, if you'd have seen this figure, okay, if you consider this as a clock, okay, at 12 o'clock, there is something called as unstable. And at 6 o'clock, there is something called as stable. And over to 3 o'clock, there is something called extrovert. And over to 9 o'clock, okay, there is something called as introvert. Now, let us talk about human personalities through this Eisenach model. Okay, like he talks about 4 personalities. I'm sure that you would have heard a lot about it. And one reason that why I prefer this way of looking at personality is that this personality has ancient roots. Now, it's not a modern invention, but this is something that is being built upon something that was very ancient. In fact, it was Greeks who spoke about 4 major emotions. And obviously from there, okay, like the roots are found in. And these 4 elements can often be found here. So I just want you to do a kind of a checklist now. Okay. So I'm sure like this is actually a personality test that I'm doing, where I'm asking you to be the judge for yourself and to know your personality in a better way. Okay. So let us start from 12 o'clock. Okay. I want you to like go through all these elements here and probably rate what are the factors that come close to you. For example, okay, imagine if touchy is there, yes, you can tick it. If restlessness is not there inside of you, you can strike it out. Or if you feel that you're aggressive, like you can take it out. Okay, so I want you to like go through this entire clock and have a kind of an understanding of what makes you, okay, in terms of emotion or in terms of human action. Now this chart has both the elements there. One, it also has the element of emotion. Another one is the element of behavior. So considering the fact, okay, that you are actually going through different kinds of checklist here, and you can just keep ticking on things. And after ticking on things, I just want you to compare yourself, like where you stand. Imagine if your rating is more from 12 o'clock to 3 o'clock, probably your personality can be called as choleric. Okay. Imagine if your weightage is more on extroverted to stable, that is from 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock, then your personality can be called as sanguine. Now, obviously, those are the triads of sanguine. Okay, these are actually triads. Triads are nothing but characters that are grouped together. Okay, characteristics that are grouped together. And from 6 to 9, okay, imagine that you have more positives there, then probably you're phlegmatic. Then from 9 o'clock to 12 o'clock, if those elements are found inside of you, probably you're melancholic. Okay. Now these are basically the 4 ways of looking at yourself. Okay, this is one such method of looking at a personality, not the only method. But then one reason is that this is also very famous. People, they know about what is melancholic, choleric, phlegmatic, and sanguine, all these ideas. Like they have heard about it, they know about it. But sometimes we have problem in relating who we are. Okay. Now the question is this. So imagine if I am melancholy today, can I become someone tomorrow? Yes, chances are there, because our personalities are shaped by life events. When I go through certain life events, probably I can also learn new skills into my life. I can adapt towards this environment, and I can also become a better person. So what happens here is that sometimes there can also be a personality growth, or there can also be a personality switch. Though we switch, or though there is a change, we don't completely change into something that is new, but then we accommodate new values into our life. We accommodate new traits into our life, and that can actually make our life more flexible and more accommodative to live in a very in a very better way. Okay, so this is one test that you can actually do. So one is you can see if you can like ticket yourself, and if you can find yourself more close to any of this nature, probably you can also Google more, and you can see as to like what really makes you. So that is one. Okay, so this is one way of looking at what is your personality. Let me switch on to this another model. This is the most recent model, and contemporary psychologists, they prefer this way of looking at human personality. Number one, like they speak about 5 major triads that people can have. Now what we see here is that here triads are limited only to 1. Okay, but what we see here is that it just talks about 5 triads that we have, and based on our life, based on our values, based on our perceptions, these 5 elements might vary from one person to another person. Okay, but these 5 elements are essentially present inside of a person. Number 1 is the idea of openness, which means the tendency to appreciate new art, ideas, values, feelings, and behaviors. The tendency to appreciate new art, ideas, values, feelings, and behaviors. So that is one of the triad. The second triad, okay, is conscientiousness, which means the tendency to be careful, on time for appointments, to follow rules, and to be hardworking. So someone who is very careful about their act, and someone who is very careful about what they need to do and how they need to do. So planning ability, the ability to work things out. So that is it. The third one, extraversion, is the tendency to be very social, the tendency to be talkative, sociable, and to enjoy others. So the tendency to have a dominant style, but this dominant style need not be seen as a negative aspect. This is the ability to relate to a person in a very positive way and to have a positive influence on someone. So that's what we mean by a dominant style here. And the fourth one is agreeableness, tendency to agree and go along with others rather than to assert one's own opinion and choice. So agreeableness is basically a trait where you're not so self-centered, but you're other-centered. You're not too focused on yourself, but then you're more focused on the other. Okay, so that is the element that we speak about, agreeableness. And the fifth one is called neuroticism. Okay, so that is the tendency to frequently experience negative emotions such as anger, worry, sadness, as well as being interpersonally sensitive. Now here it is. These 5 elements are definitely present inside of us. But how much of it is present is a question that we need to ask ourselves. And how much of this do I really express it out? It's again a question that we need to ask of ourselves. Okay, but then the contemporary way of looking at psychology, the recent way of looking at this is that people have, in fact, some of the prominent psychologists today, they really stick on to this 5 triads. It's also called as big 5-factor theory. Okay, and this is how people actually try looking into personalities as such. Now, having said about personalities as such, okay, so far what we have focused is that we have focused on the first aspect, that is the emotional aspect. So from emotional aspect, like we have moved on to this idea of personality. Now we are like taking it little further, okay, like we are going to see in terms of emotional challenges. Now, what do you mean by emotional challenges? Emotional challenges is basically being confronted and facing the opposite of your personality, which threats oneself. So the understanding that I can give you is here. Imagine a person A is facing person B. Imagine the context that person A has a particular way of living a life. They have a particular way of presenting themselves. They have a particular way of thinking, feeling, and expressing it. Imagine if that is the kind of style that they live in. On the other side, okay, you meet someone who is exactly the opposite of you. What happens is that becomes a kind of challenge. Now, why do I use this word challenge? Okay, I use this word challenge in a very positive way, where it can actually help a person to grow in a better way, and that can also help the person to accept the kind of changes that can happen around them. So imagine the context where we are in a classroom setup or even in a department setup. We would confront different personalities. Okay, when we confront different personalities, we can often be challenged as to how we need to respond to it. Now that is what we are going to see now. Okay, like that is what I wish that we go deep now into. Obviously, like I've used this emojis to explain it. So consider the clock pattern again. So imagine the pointer number 12. Okay, pointer 3, 6, and 9. So imagine the clock model out here. What are these emotional challenges that I talk about? Okay, consider that you are in the center. Consider that you are in the center, and let us assume that you are happy now. Okay, let us assume that you're happy now and you're having a very peaceful life. Let us assume your personality or the emotion that you're carrying as of now is happiness, joy, calmness, and there is a lot of stability inside of you. Now, what happens is that when I live like that, okay, it doesn't mean necessarily people around me live like that. Okay. Now I will turn this into a day-to-day lifestyle that we might face now. Okay. Now this is what I have put up in a clock model because I want you to have an understanding of 360-degree way of how we relate with ourselves. Number one, we relate with people who are superior to us. We relate with people who are equal to us. Okay, and we also relate to people who are much lower to us. When I say superior, equal, lower, this is not in terms of economics. This is in terms of age or in terms of position or in terms of work that we do. Okay, so consider the fact that we are here as a faculty in a college. And consider the fact that you're happy now. Okay, now we in college would have our superiors there. It could be our respective heads, or it could be any college official whom we meet, or any sort of someone who is an administrative task who would be above us. And relationally speaking, we would also have other relationship, like we would have our parents who are superior to us, and we look up to them and we learn a lot from them. And obviously there is an emotional change between when we talk about parents and when we talk about an administrative setup where you have a superior over you. That's fine. So that is one understanding. The second understanding that we need to have is that we also have people whom we relate to equally. That could be your colleague. That could be your friends. That could be anyone who is close to you, within your close circle, someone whom you are reachable to. Now, that is like looking someone who are equal to you. So that's the point here. And the third one is someone who is much younger, probably your student group or even someone that whom you haven't met in terms of authority, or someone whom you haven't met in terms of accountability. Okay, so that can also happen. Okay, so consider the fact that you are living in this world with an emotion, and you are not just alone, you are being filled by number of other emotions. Okay, so let me start from the top order. Okay, so imagine that you're happy, and consider the situation that even your boss is happy. Okay, like your superior is happy. Okay, and imagine the case the below, even your classroom, your students are happy, then there is a positive emotion. But the problem is this, sometimes this might not happen in reality because there are people with different emotions there. Okay, for example, even when we look into our classroom, some students can be very naughty, some students can be very harsh, some students can be very sad because of the things that happens in their life. Someone could be super cool thinking that they know everything. Someone might be very sleepy, and someone might be respectable, calm, and also steady. So we have different types of students whom we need to work it out. Now, what happens is that when we are confronted with all these sort of emotions, there is something that is happening within us. Okay, there is something that's happening within us. What it is. Okay, I would like to explain it through this picture. Now, this is basically it's basically a theoretical framework that comes from René Descartes, whom I projected earlier, who spoke about emotions as 6 fundamental expressions. Okay, René Descartes. Now he comes up with this idea, and this picture was developed by Daniel Dennett. This is also called as Cartesian theta. Now, if you would look into this image itself, okay, image is very complex, but then it speaks volumes. Okay, now it talks about an enjoyer or a person within a person. So consider that we live with the body. Okay, like we live with the physical body. We also have something inside of us. Okay, now you can term it in any way. Okay, psychologists would prefer the word mind. Okay, a spiritualist might call the word soul or divinity. Okay, for someone who doesn't want to use these words, they may also use words like consciousness. They may also use other supplementary words for it. But what we need to understand is that whether you come from a theistic framework, or even from an atheistic framework, or even any materialistic framework as such, definitely there is someone, there is an accountability within yourself, which means there is a live interaction that happens within yourself, and there is a response and a stimulus that happens within yourself, and that is why we react to certain things, and that is where we actually sometimes that leads us to tell people like who we are. So that can also happen. Now, I just want you to take up this idea called mind for our sake, so that understanding will be better. And when I say this idea of mind, it's the ability to think, it is the ability to rationalize, and it is the ability to work things out in a rational way. So that's how I would define it. Now let us talk about this. Okay. Imagine, so in this picture, what we see is that a person is there watching as to what the person is watching. Now let me put it up in this practical scenario where we can really relate to it. Number one, consider the fact that that you have a good experience. What happens is that your mind can actually recapture those events again and again as if it happened now. Let me put it up like this. Okay, you go up to a movie, you watch a movie, and a particular scene hits you very hard and you like it. And when you come back home, what happens is that this particular image, the visual that you have seen, can be played into your mind again and again, and it can also happen for a multiple time. So it's not one time event. What happens is that, like, you're there, you are actually feeling through it. Okay, or consider the case if Indian cricket team would win a title, when they win a championship, you can enjoy that game again and again in your mind. It can be an event in your life. Now this is a positive emotion that I'm playing about. Imagine if I'm going to the other side. Okay, imagine if I'm taking you through the other side, and imagine if I'm talking about a painful event. What happens is that a person can also recollect a painful event again and again. It can come in forms of visuals, it can come in forms of auditory, it can also come in forms of feeling. And what happens is that the person within you has to bear it, or the person who is inside of you needs to carry this forward to understand what's happening there. Able to get it? Now, this is what I call as a challenge. The internal turmoil, okay, the internal turmoil or an internal struggle that a person goes through. If it happens for a very long time, probably it can lead you into existential crisis. And this existential crisis can lead you to being sad. Now, you all know what is sad. Sad is seasonal affective disorder, which means something that happens outside of you impacts you. And imagine if the seasonal affective disorder carries on for a time, for weeks, for months, probably that can lead to depression. Okay, so when we talk of depression, it's not a one-time event. It is an event that happens and carries on, and the memories are still fresh and people are unable to come out of it. So this is one negative event like I'm presenting to you. So consider the fact that you are there seated as a faculty here. You have events that surrounding you, like you have things that surrounds you. You have events that's happening around you. Imagine the situation that that you have a terrible experience in your classroom. Probably when you go back home, it can still ring into your mind. That can actually happen. Or consider the fact that, that there was a happy moment with you. You can still go back to your home. You can share that emotion with your spouse, with your kids, with your close ones. Okay, that can also happen. Now, how do we work it out? How do we work it out? The suggestion that I would probably place here is that when you let your mind, when I use this word mind, I'm using this word mind in the context of rationality. Imagine if events happen into your life and if you're able to rationalize why this event have happened in this given context, chances are there that we can have a better understanding of why it happened and how I need to respond to it. Okay. Now let us go back to this image again. Okay. Let us talk about the understanding part now. Imagine that you in the center, that you're stable. Okay, imagine that you in the center, like you're happy, you're calm, and you see your superior is being hard on you. What we need to understand here is that we need to understand the fact that I am not the reason for my superior to be hard on me. Probably the person might also have some events in their life that has made them the way they are and the way that they are relating to me in a very harsh way. Okay, so that's the kind of redefinition that we need to have. Sometimes what we think is that I am the reason for my superior to be hard on me. Not necessary. Okay, because they as an individuals, if imagine like you place this order on them. Okay, imagine that you bring down your superiors down. Your superiors would also have their superiors. Okay, your senior people, your senior faculty would also have someone who is more superior to them, and probably they may also carry that emotion over here. Okay, if you can rationalize things like that, then it will be fine. Consider the fact in your department, your colleague just walks in with a kind of emotion that you didn't appreciate about. Okay, like you're not happy about it. Okay, what we need to understand is that, okay, probably something would have happened, an event had taken place that has triggered an emotion on this person to react in that way. Now imagine sometimes we can be a reason to, okay, like sometimes I can provoke someone to showcase a particular emotion. That can also happen. And I'm not talking about me being provocative as of now or you being provocative, because we have assumed the fact that you're calm now. Okay, so we are just dealing with that ideas in mind. Sometimes that can also happen. And at that point of time, probably we need to work out saying that, yes, I need to correct myself and you need to work it out. And the relational challenges need to be worked out. That's true. Okay, that needs to be worked out and that needs to be carried on. But what we need to understand is that people have emotions not necessarily because of who we are, but because of what they have been through. Same applies to students when they come and sit in a classroom. Sometimes when a student is harsh, sometimes when a student is funny, sometimes a student even acts as if super cool. Okay, sometimes a student is sleepy. They have had life events. I've literally seen students, sometimes they come, they sleep in class. And I felt bad, okay, was I in any way like, did I become a reason for them to sleep in class? And when I went and talked to them, that's where like students, they tell sometimes like they need to do a job late night, they go for a part-time job, they come late to their rooms. And then morning also they go, they do some small works here and there, then they come to class. They have stories. And when someone is sad in a class, okay, like it's not because of me, or if someone is angry in my class as a student, probably it is not me, because they have gone through an event in their life and they are coming to the classroom with those emotions in. And the challenge for us as a faculty is to work out these emotions and to develop skills that would actually help us to identify the emotional need of someone else and exchange them in a proper way. So consider the fact, if my student is harsh with me, consider the fact that I ask a question and student would reply in a very harsh way, or I ask a doubt to my superior and the superior would react to an harsh way. I need to really think on how I need to work it out. Okay, I need not essentially give a word back, or I need not necessarily push it out like and say like this is how I would respond to it. Not necessary. I can take some time and I can really work it out. Now, how do we work it out? Okay, this is what I call as emotional dilemmas. Now we are getting into the third part. So far we have done two. One, we started with personality. So from personality, we moved on to, we started with emotion. We ended up emotions as personality. Then from there, we moved on to emotional challenges. And now we are going into dilemmas. How do I even react to emotions, or how do I even react to personalities that I'm not responsible for, or I'm not the reason for? So imagine if someone, if I just walk into a classroom, if a student is angry there, I've done nothing, but I need to respond to this emotion. I need to respond to this emotion. How do I do? What kind of choices that I need to take within this given time? So consider the fact that when I walk into a class and I see a student is staring at me or like angry at me, how do I respond? Either I can also stab the person or like give a very angry face to them. That is a possibility. On the other side, I can also give a smile, which can also irritate the person to be more angry. That can also happen in. Or otherwise, I can just go close to the person and ask, what happened? Did I do something to you? Able to get that? So this is what I'm talking about, like emotional dilemmas. It's not, when I talk about emotional dilemmas, it is the way how we are going to respond to the emotional challenges that comes before you. Not just in terms of classroom, it can also happen back home. It can happen anywhere. And it can happen in any given scenario and any given context. So the idea is like, how do we even do it? Okay. Now I want you to, I'm going to like do a kind of a small psychological test on you. So in case if you have, please watch the screen. I want you to stare at this cube for maybe few seconds or even 10 to 15 seconds. And then I want you to realize something. Okay. Just stare at it for like 10 to 15 seconds. Just stare at this cube for 10 to 15 seconds. And if there's something change happens to you, please respond in form of chat or keep that change inside of you so that we can talk about it. Yeah, so I'm sure that you would have seen something different there. You would have definitely seen something that's happening there. And that's nothing but when you look at it for a very long time, okay, the perception automatically changes. Okay, the cube would be focused on one direction. Initially, it will be onto your right. Okay, when you focus it for a long time, it moves towards your left automatically. Okay, so this is basically the way how your mind works when you look into something for a very long time. So imagine if someone is angry at you, okay, imagine if you can really see it as they are. When you can literally see them from their perspective, you can also change your perspective. Okay, you can also change your perspective in. So this is how your mind actually works. The more you look into something, chances are there that there is a alteration in your perception. Okay, like you really alter your perception to see something different there. Now, obviously, like this is basically a simple trick that we do, which is called as a Necker cube. Okay, it's like when you look at from one side, when you initially look at it, it is on your right side, and when you stare it for some time, it moves towards your left. Okay, so there is always some kind of difference that happens there. Yeah, so the point is this: what do I do? Okay, when there is an emotional dilemma, don't react. wait. Wait just like this until your perception changes. Okay, when you're able to see that perception, then you understand what it is. Now, obviously, in Indian tradition, okay, in Jaina system, we talk about how 5 blind people would try to feel an elephant. Okay, one person would get hold of the legs and would say elephant is like a pillar. Another person would hold on to the tail and would call it as a rope. Another person would go on to the ear, would say like it is more like a fan. Different perceptions can evolve when we are blind. Our blindness can receive sight only when we wait on those emotions, see clearly as to what they are. Now, what we have learned is that in this society, we have not been trained to wait. We have been trained to push things. We have been given like deadlines. We have been given time frame. We want to push things, like we want to live in a hurry world. And we also think that our emotion would also cope up with us when we do things like that. Not necessarily. Okay, like that's where sometimes our human efforts fail, and that is where sometimes even our understanding of our reality goes very dim. So what I would ask you here is just to wait and see different perceptions that can come in. And only when you wait in terms of emotions, you can have a better sight of what is going on. Because sometimes emotions can come and blind us. Emotions can come and stop us from understanding it from a whole dimension as such. But the more you wait, the more you cling on to it, chances are there that you will have a better understanding of your emotions. Now, here is the final part. How do we respond to it? Like, how do we give an adaptive response? Okay. I'm going to talk a little bit about conflicts because my area, and I'm going to talk it more from a psychological perspective and from emotional perspective, not as a peace researcher. So, conflict. Approach conflict, which means 2 equally desirable options are there, and you're choosing one. Okay, so that is one method. So here which one is good and which one is better. Okay, so you don't have any bad elements here. Okay, so it's the option of choosing which one is good within given framework. That's one. Second, avoidance. Okay. Second is the avoidance, where you can actually avoid certain things because both seems to be negative. Okay, so that can also come in. So both can seem negative sometimes, and you're sure like you need not respond to it. So you can also quit it out. Okay. The third one is more of approach and avoidance, which means the choice may both look attractive and repulsive at the same time. Which means there is a pain and a gain attached towards it. Okay, so that is one element that we can have it there. So that is one element that we can see there, one type of conflict. And the fourth one, multiple approach avoidance, which means there is multiple gain and multiple pain, okay, multiple losses. So that can also happen in. Okay, so these are the 4 types of conflicts that we can possibly have. Now let us apply this in terms of emotion. Okay, imagine that you have a positive conflict. Okay, it's not a conflict at all, it is a time for celebration. So imagine in terms of classroom or even in terms of our work setup, when there is a positive emotions there, let us try celebrating it. Okay, when you're happy, when your superiors are happy, and even your students are happy, it's a time for department to celebrate. It's time for academia to celebrate it in any form. Could be in art form, could be in musical form, could be in intellectual form as conference. Let us celebrate it. On the other hand, okay, imagine if there is a negative coming together. Okay, what we need to do is that we need to avoid them to put down the conflict. Okay, so imagine if your superior is angry at you and is like giving a hard word on you, and you wanted to reply back because you are hurt now, you wanted to do it. So since the both element is from there, obviously it needs to be worked from both the end. The superior as well as you need to stop it. It's not going to help both of us. So that's the understanding that we need to have. And the third one, imagine if there is a choice may look both attractive and repulsive. You need to have a time for discussion and talk how we need to work it out. The same applies to the fourth one. Okay, if there is a kind of a conflict that happens in terms of positives and negatives together, we can sit, we can talk about it, we can discuss about it, we can have a department meeting, or we can have a students meeting, or we can have a researchers meeting. It's fine, we can talk about it. Okay, and then we can come into some sort of conclusion. So what is this adaptive response I'm giving here? Number one, I'm trying to give you an adaptive response of dialogue. Now this dialogue has to happen within yourself for it to take place outside. Okay, I'll cover this more, like we'll think more of this. Okay, how you can actually work it out. Okay, number one, you can try accommodating things in. Okay, so there is more reasons to coming together, and there is more reasons to collaborate, so that can happen in. Now another kind of conflict that can happen is there is something called competition that can happen. Now within colleagues or within an academic fraternity, chances are there that that we may land into a form of competition where self is being projected a lot. Sometimes that can happen in, okay, fight whatever the cost. That could be our motto sometimes, like I'm going to do this. Okay, it's nice to do, but the reason to do matters more than that. The attitude behind why I do the things that I do matters more. If it is very self-centered, probably I need to introspect myself and clarify my position. Or if it is other-centered, that's something that we need to cherish, we need to celebrate about. And imagine if everyone in a competitive position where the self is absent and the other is present. Such competitions could actually help us in a very prospective development. The third one is collaboration, where we can actually work things together. And sometimes we may also need to sacrifice and compromise certain things. And sometimes we may also say no or give up. So all these things are also present within conflict management styles. So we can't be yes all the time. We can't be no all the time. Sometimes we can collaborate, sometimes we can assist, or sometimes we can just stand back and appreciate the things that's been going on there. All this can create a lot of positivities within academia and in academic fraternity. Now, here are some personal adaptive skills that I want you to give within yourself. Okay, like how I as a person can work it out, or how I as an individual can work it out. Interpersonal communication is more important. Sometimes we don't understand people because we don't talk to them. When I sometimes, as ma'am introduced me, ma'am told me that I do teach a lot on industrial psychology, and industrial psychology definitely talks about employees' relationship to employee. Okay, like how things happens in a workspace. And I've given a lot of projects to my students, where students they study what happens in a work setup. They come back with a lot of interesting report. And students who have gone to a lot of schools and colleges to talk to teachers, to talk to professors, is that they have said like that there is no much of positive relationship between one another. And I would ask them, okay, like what would be the solution that you guys would give? Communication, like we need to sit and talk. So that is something that we need to do. Misunderstanding happens because we don't talk much, because people feel that when we talk a lot, that can lead to a lot of misunderstanding. True. Initially, yes, it happens. That is why in team formation, we talk something called as forming and storming. Okay, like as soon as you form yourself, you would storm, like you would work out, like you would talk about your differences, you would really work things out. And that is essentially good for you, and it is also good for the department, and it's also good for the institution that we work with, where storming can take place. And slowly after the storming, you will move on to this another phase where you will form norms. Like you will be happy to say this is what you will do, and the other person will be happy to say that is what they will do, and you will try complimenting one another. And the more time you spend with each other, the more time you try complimenting, you would become the better team. So the problem is that sometimes in institutions and even at individual level, storming remains as a storming for a very long time, because we are not able to carry it forward. Like we are not able to accept the difference. Okay, so that is something that we need to work on. So communication is one. Secondly, it is the ability to control and managing your emotions. Simple advice that I give you is that don't respond. I always tell people that you don't decide things when you're happy. You don't decide things when you're sad. Okay, when you're so happy, don't come up with a decision saying that you will do something like this. It's not going to happen. Okay, on the other side, when you're too sad, don't take decisions that can, because that be some of the most terrible things that can happen. But rather wait. Wait on yourself. Take some time and then work it out. Then, as much as possible, prevent conflict. Be a person that would accommodate differences in. Um, if at all there is a conflict, try to build positive relationships there. And you wait for the timing. Like you don't, you need to judge timing and you need to wait for the timing. And you need to really take some time to settle things out. Even right actions done in a wrong time could have a negative impact. What you have done is right, but imagine if the timing is wrong. Okay, things can end up in a very negative way. So sense for the timing, wait for the timing. Even if you have missed the timing, don't worry, the time would come again. Okay, that's what time is all about. Okay, time would come again and again. So the part from our side is to wait patiently, to be calm, to be relaxed, and then to pick things one by one. And finally, we are no more in a binary world. So it's no more like yes and no's, no more like black and white. So a problem can have multiple solutions. It doesn't mean if person A and person B are arguing about A view and B view, it will not necessarily be like that. Okay, we can also be more open to see as to combinations of A and B, or even a new combination of C or other combinations. So let us not stick on to our own self, but let us also be willing to present other perspectives inside of us, so that there can be a lot of positivity that can happen. So I'll just end up with the few more minutes. Probably I'll end up with what we can do in academia as such. Okay, what we do there in classrooms is that this is a kind of an attitude that I have with myself, and this is a kind of a conviction that I carry with myself whenever I walk into a classroom. When I walk into a classroom, this is the attitude that I walk in. And I feel that I'm quite, that we all are like blessed to be teachers, because we have been given young lives to shape them in a better way. Okay. And the reason that we are teachers today is that we did have one teacher who inspired us to become teachers. And definitely we would also inspire people to do that. Now, walk into a classroom, I look for these kinds of opportunities where I see student as a gift that this country or their parents have given. Yes, but I'm talking about a much wider wider commitment, which is a moral commitment towards a budding society, towards a budding generation, towards a budding people around there. Where we go, we meet them. It is not about how we see them, but rather like how we can actually work it out. So 3 dimensions very much related to psychology, philosophy, and even social convictions that we have. One is from Paulo Freire, Pedagogy of the Oppressed. One of the most classical works that asks students, that would ask education itself to have a critical consciousness. So the question is this, like when I walk into a classroom, am I willing, am I allowing students to be critical? Am I allowing students even to be critical of myself? Where I give them space to say, students, you're wrong, or your interpretation is wrong. Maybe your assumptions are unfair. Such a kind of critical evaluation is what I'm talking about. And do I also see student as a co-creators of my knowledge, which means when I go to a class, do I also have an attitude to learn from my students? That's something like probably that we need to ask for ourselves. Secondly, the qualifications and all that we have, that's fine, amazing. Okay, but then the fundamental question that boils down is this: am I just an instructor there who is going to give them some knowledge and then come back, or am I going to be more like an influencer? I have often told this in my class whenever I meet students. I've told them, if you can Google the same lecture in YouTube, or if you can YouTube the same topic, I'm sure that you would find some of the best resource person in that particular field, and he can be more knowledgeable, more experienced, and more advanced in teaching you in a better way. So the question that I ask myself is that, why do I go to class? It's not about just being the best teacher, or it's not about being the best to them in terms of conveying what I've learned. It's not about that, but it is to make students feel that my presence can help them to be a better person. It is not just the role of being an instructor, but it is also the role of being an influencer. So the question I'm going to ask you is this: when we go to the class next time, it's going to be just as a teacher, or even the online classes that we do nowadays. It's going to be just like an instructor mode, or would I see this as an opportunity to influence people, individuals' life, where their life can become more meaningful for themselves? So that's the second one. And the third one, it's basically the idea of it's basically 3P model. Like if you Google it, like you would also have learned, you would also understand about it. Now, this is what I told a little bit earlier. Understand the background of a student, understand the context that we live in, and understand the way as to how things happen within a given space and time. Secondly, what goes when the student learns? What do we teach them? How do we teach them? And what are the takeaways? Now, if I need to put it up in a more business model, okay, it's something like this. If I as a customer would walk into a store, if I would buy a product, I wish that this product would become useful to me. Okay, so let me put up this business model here. Sorry to use this word. I don't believe education is a business, but just for an understanding sake, okay. Imagine that students come as a customer to me, to my course. Okay, what would I give them? And what would they take out of this classroom? It's a kind of a weird dream that I have, but then I have this dream that every student that I meet in my class would at least have one lifetime memory of my classroom with them forever. That could be even a joke that we have cracked, or it could be a serious idea exchange that we have had, or it could be even a simple wish that we have told student, maybe on their birthdays, or even on times when they have gone through a hard time. I wish that that happens to every student in our classroom. If that change can happen, what we have done here is that there is a positive emotion that we are building through this education. And if we can do that together as a team of teachers, different space and different time and different environment, I'm sure that the whole perspective of a generation can be very positive. And sometimes we miss it out because we share a lot of negativity in forms of emotions. We use a lot of controlling factors. But if we can use education as a liberative model, where you can help individuals to understand themselves and to understand others, I think we have done our part. And we are no more just an instructors, but we become influencers. And as John C. Maxwell says, leaders are influencers and teachers are leaders. And yes, we have done it. So thank you so much for your patient listening. I ended here. So we started with emotions. We went on to emotional challenges, dilemmas, and adaptive response. Feel free to comment, agree, disagree, or anything that you want. And I think I'll wind up here and I give it back to ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Dear participants, you can ask queries through chat box. You can send your question through chat box. Sir, based on chat box, you can answer, sir.
Yes, 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 sir.
Okay.
Thank you so much. A lot of positive comments from you. So hope this session was quite helpful for you. So thanks for your wonderful feedbacks. Yeah, sir, could you please explain the theory of emotionology by? Yes, Peter Einstein's. Ma'am, I'm limited on that area, ma'am. I'm sorry, I don't know about that particular theoretical aspect. I'm sorry, ma'am. Yeah, I wish I could do it, but then, my expertise on all that area. I wish I would do it. I'm sorry, like I'm not so good in that area. Yes, sir. Philosophy is also seen on history writings. Yes, sir, pretty much, yeah. In fact, though I was studying philosophy, there was a lot of interest in history, because when I studied in school, the only subject that was yeah, there is a lot of similarity between history and philosophy. I think when we need to evaluate ideas, we need to evaluate them in some form of context and date matters. Yeah, so as we see, yes, there is a lot of similarities in. Okay, a very nice question has come up. So consider the case that how to deal with a person who is going to drugs or addiction. Okay, okay, that's a very fine question. Now, addiction in itself, it can be seen as an obsessive behavior that happens. It's not just sudden framework, but then it happens through a process. So how do we make a person, or how do we deal with someone who goes through a addiction as such? Now, obviously, that drugs and drinks are there, but the very new form of drug that we see these days, and it's being very harsh on youngsters, is this drug called porn. Okay, like pornography has been taken very hard. So I don't think that we can just limit it to drugs, drinks, or it can also be led to this idea called pornography and other things. So how do we deal it with them? Number one, for any form of addiction, there is a reason for a behavior. The reason for the behavior could be rooted in some form of loss that happened to an individual. That could be in form of relationship. That could be in form of an expectation that wasn't successful, or it can also be something that is related to something that made a person feel void. Now, what happens is that slowly they may try filling that emptiness with things like drugs, or slowly they may try filling with the things like some sort of substitution there, so that they can have a positive emotion. Now, what happens is that emotion initially it thrills them, it gives them a lot of positive stimulus, but slowly what happens is that the stimulus goes down, but the habit continues. Now, this is where you see a lot of people who are not happy about it, but they still keep doing it. Okay, where they are not happy about doing it, but they still keep doing it. So what we can definitely do here is that it's not a event, but it is a process. Because, if someone is into addiction as such, like it's not going to be easy to break it out. It's not going to be that easy to quit it initially. But what we can do is that we can take them through a journey. So the suggestion that I will give you is that you relate to the person. And if you have a counseling background, like if you have had a counseling course, like if you have gone through a counseling session, definitely they would have told you how to lead someone in the form of counseling to bring them out of addiction. Okay, there are a lot of steps involved in. So one you can do is that you can be as a peer instead of being a counselor, and you can recommend the person to a counselor to do it. Now, why I am suggesting counselor is that because when we don't know the individual as such, like who they are, what made them to do, it's going to be hard on to deal with them as an individual. And plus, secondly, if we as someone who know them would go and talk to them, chances are that they're not be open about it. But sometimes if a stranger is there in the form of counselors, they do have methods by which they can inquire a person, where they can win their trust, so that they can actually talk about that in a very free way. So if someone goes through an addiction, if someone goes through a problem, a behavioral problem, need not be just drugs and related habits. It could also be anger. Anger is also a kind of compulsive behavior, but we haven't categorized it as addiction as such. It can also be hate. It can also be stress. It can also be any sort of emotion. What we need to do is that there has been some sort of lacking there, and they wish that this emotion would give them a comfort there. Now, what we can do is that on a personal level, on what we call as a philosophical counseling, is that we would ask the person to sit, talk, and we would ask them to talk about the pain that they went through. So the moment when they talk about their pain, chances are there that they may have a different perspective now. Okay, so that can also happen. So the person who deals with goes through drugs and know the reason why the person is doing that way. If you can handle it out, handle it. If not, take the person to a counselor who would actually help them to overcome the situation over a frame of time. It's not going to be immediate, but it could be in a framework of time. And if we are going through such things, okay, like can we be a counselor to ourselves? Yes, that's possible. What we need to do that is that we need to evaluate what made me to get into that actions. What made this individual to, or even including do certain things. If you can rationalize that part, if you can come up with that answer, we need to build up with the answer that can create us a sense of comfort zone, and that can help us to overcome the negative behavior that we've been carrying so far. So this is one way of dealing it, sir. I haven't given a very broad, like I haven't given like step 1, step 2, because that's complex. So I've just given you a kind of broad framework as to how you can actually deal with this. Thank you, sir. Yeah, which works of philosophy do you recommend for a historical person? Okay, one book that we recommend, probably it's also quite famous, is the work of Samuel Enoch Stumpf. So Socrates to Sartre. Okay, so that is one good book that we can start with. And this book is written not necessarily from from a philosophical perspective, but goes to an historical perspective. So if you are new to philosophy, probably you need to have a feel of philosophy. From an historical perspective, Samuel Enoch Stumpf is a good start. And the language form that he uses is very simple, very good read, doesn't uses with a lot of heaviness there. So that is one. On the other side, imagine that you are looking for a heavy philosophical work. Okay, I'm going to give a very old book and also a recent book. One old book would be one recent book is by A.C. Garling. Okay, so Garling has also written a lot of this. Being a historian and also as philosopher, he has combined both these elements in. And this would be little advanced compared to Socrates. Now, another book that I told about the old book is History of Philosophy by Frederick Opus. Okay, it's quite old, but then it's like around 8 volumes, and it's actually a good work. Moves in an historical order from a Greek. Obviously, what I'm presenting here is more from a Greek understanding. Sorry, from the Western philosophy as such. We need to focus on Indian philosophy. The good book that I would suggest is that Outline of Indian Philosophy by Hiriana. It's again an old book, but then still it's one of the most favorite book for some of the top philosophers. So that can also happen. And if you want to have an advanced book in Indian philosophy, any book written by Professor Jane, it can give you a lot of. Yes, sir. Thank you so much. Yes. Any other question? Yes, ma'am. Over to you, ma'am.
Sir, that's it. I think so, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yes. So thank you all for your patient listening. Thank you so much, and thanks for all your positive feedbacks. Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you.
Sir, hello.
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
Sir,
ma'am.
I am really thankful for your insightful and useful presentation, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am.
I think that it will be much more useful for the participants as a teachers. They are asking your email ID.
Yes, ma'am. I will post it in the group. Is it
One
fine, ma'am?
of the participants are asking your email ID.
Can I post it in the chat, ma'am?
Okay, sir.
Yeah. So yeah, feel free to even further this discussion if you have any questions or anything that you want me to work on with. Yes, I'm more willing to do that. And yeah, my mail ID is sampraveenkumar@mcc.edu.in. Okay. So I'll be posting it here in the chat box. So feel free to have my mail ID.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
For
Yes,
your
ma'am. Privilege, ma'am.
interacting
Thanks for giving me this opportunity.
participants for their interactive participation. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Dear participants, we will send the feedback from afternoon session. Thank you. The second session will be start at 3 o'clock, afternoon 3 o'clock. Thank you all.